We are now just over a week away from the most consequential midterm elections in recent memory, and Republicans have made their priorities very clear. Continue spreading conspiracy theories about the 2020 election, intimidate people trying to vote in this election, and claim preemptively that the results must be illegitimate if they lose. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. These are anxiety-ridden times, so let's start with the good news. Thanks to new relaxed COVID restrictions in the building, our cue card guy, Wally, no longer has to wear a face shield during the show. Now, that's true of everyone here, but Wally's face shield was different. Want to tell him why, Wally?
Well, yeah, mine had a tiny wet sponge on it.
Wally's had a tiny wet sponge on it. Wally, you want to tell him why it had a tiny wet sponge?
Yeah, well, I couldn't lick my fingers between each cue card, so I needed the sponge for moisture.
He couldn't use his tongue, so he had a tiny wet sponge. He couldn't do this, so he had to do this. And for over 2 years, I've had to read cue cards while looking at that, thinking to myself, that sponge is a stand-in for a human tongue. And I dare anyone here, I dare any person here or watching to see a mask today that's more disgusting than that. Happy Halloween, everybody. My national nightmare is over. Moving on. Wally, I said moving on. Oh. Republicans have made it clear if they win back power, they'll do things like impeach Joe Biden, pass a national abortion ban, and threaten to detonate the economy to force cuts to Social Security and Medicare. But it's not just Congress where pivotal elections are being held. Pro-Trump Republican election deniers across the country are running for key positions that would allow them to supervise elections in swing states, and some are poised to win. The Washington Post conducted an exhaustive survey and found that a majority of GOP nominees on the ballot this fall deny or question the 2020 results. And the website 538 found that most of those candidates are likely to win.
60% of Americans are going to have an election denier on the ballot this fall. Of the 552 Republican nominees running for office, 200 have fully denied the legitimacy of the 2020 election.
We simply cannot have a functioning democracy where one party denies the legitimacy of any election they don't win. You don't see Jets fans spraying champagne on each other, claiming they beat the Patriots yesterday, even though they lost 22-17. And yeah, the Jets jokes are back, baby. After a red hot start to the season, the Jets lost to their bitter division rivals at home yesterday. So this morning, first thing I did, I walked right up to our security guard, Jim Breyer, and I said, how about those Jets yesterday? And he said, stand back or I'll crush your head like a peanut, joke man. And then I said, yes, sir, because I respect Jim, because at no point did he wear a tiny wet sponge on his face. Take, for example, the GOP's nominee for Secretary of State in Arizona, a guy named Mark Finchem. Finchem was actually at the Capitol on January 6th and has been interviewed by the January 6th committee. In fact, just a few weeks ago, Finchem, who was currently leading many polls for Secretary of State, which supervises Arizona's elections, tweeted, all I want for Christmas is a few arrests of election fraud criminals, which is the worst Mariah Carey cover I've ever heard. And of course, it will not shock you to learn that these lunatics have absolutely no evidence whatsoever for their lies. In fact, Finchem was asked directly by a reporter for Time magazine if he would certify Biden as the winner of the 2024 election if Biden gets the most votes. And this is how the exchange went. Finchem told the reporter, I think you're proposing something that, quite frankly, is a fantasy. Why, I asked him, was it so impossible to believe Biden won in Arizona? It strains credibility, Finchem responded. Isn't it interesting that I can't find anyone who will admit that they voted for Joe Biden? Well, where were you looking, in the crowd on January 6th? Do you think maybe if someone voted for Joe Biden, they wouldn't want to say that to you, a Looney Tune who asked Santa for Christmas arrests? Other than that, solid logic. That's his argument. If you don't personally know anyone who voted for Joe Biden, then by logical extension, no one voted for Joe Biden. In fact, now that you mention it, if you never met Joe Biden and you don't know anyone who's met Joe Biden, then how do you even know Joe Biden exists? He's probably not even real. That's why he gets stuck on stage sometimes and freezes in place. He's actually just a computer simulation, and what we're seeing is a glitch. By the way, if you recently bought a tech company, that whole glitch thing was a joke, not something for you to post and say, food for thought. And sure enough, all these stolen election lies are having very real consequences. In Arizona, for example, self-appointed poll watchers, some with guns and tactical gear, have been loitering near early voting drop boxes to intimidate voters.
These people, waiting in the dark hours of Arizona nights,
What brings you out tonight?
are part of an effort by conservatives to watch, critics say intimidate, voters as they drop early ballots into drop boxes. Arizona's Secretary of State's office has referred 6 incidents of potential voter intimidation in these parking lots to the FBI for investigation. Some individuals have been armed and masked.
They're referencing these people, varying numbers at 2 different drop boxes in Maricopa County, people sitting in lawn chairs, and then some say they are camo-clad, that they are intimidating, that they have a clear intent to intimidate.
All right, first of all, why the are you wearing camouflage in a parking lot? Why do they even sell camouflage in Phoenix? The only thing you can blend in with wearing camouflage in Phoenix is all the other idiots wearing camouflage in Phoenix. The whole point of camouflage is to blend in. If you wanted to hide in a parking lot, you should disguise yourself as a shopping cart. Mongoose, why aren't you at your post? They rolled me back into the cart corral, sir. It continues to shock me how these guys continue to be both incredibly dangerous menaces and also complete dip at the same time. We are living in an era of lethal dip. On the one hand, they're accomplishing their mission of scaring voters away from drop boxes, but on the other hand, they're sitting in lawn chairs wearing camouflage like a dude trying to catch a gopher in his backyard. You think you can eat my petunias, you bucktooth son of a bitch? You got another thing coming. I got a cooler full of Natty Light and no place to be. Aw, damn it! Honey, can you run to the store and get more Natty Light? The gophers ran off with it again. Let's not have any illusions about who's fueling all of this. The MAGA cult of election deniers led by the GOP statewide candidates in Arizona and, of course, Donald Trump, who has continued to spread deranged claims about the drop boxes on social media and even reposted the specific address of one of those boxes.
Donald Trump himself has now reposted videos and photos on his social media account of new, unfounded claims by these Dropbox watchers. And another repost of his included the exact address of one of those Maricopa County drop boxes.
Trump is now posting the specific addresses of ballot drop boxes in Arizona. Do you know how out of your mind obsessed you have to be to even know the address of a ballot drop box? I don't even know the exact address of my 6-year-old school. I just drive around until I find a building with drawings in the window. I mean, not him. He's got a real talent. Got a real Claude Monet in the house. At this point, Trump's social media accounts are like scavenger hunts for insane people. It's the Da Vinci Code. You have to find a Dropbox, a Susan B. Anthony dollar, and the severed head of a bird. And if you need a hint for where to find a severed head, I would check under a windmill, because to a bird, a windmill. The windmill is the Freddy Krueger. We love Freddy Krueger, don't we, folks? He was a tough character. He was a tough character, but he cleaned up Elm Street. He cleaned it up. No one gives him any credit for that, but he came in, he killed all the kids, and now Elm Street is a nice place to live again. No more slumber parties keeping you up all night on Elm Street. I remember Freddie came up to me once, tears in his eyes, up face, and he said to me, sir, I may be hard to look at, but at least I don't wear a mask with a tiny wet sponge on it. And I respect that. So true. So true. Couldn't lick his fingers either because they're knives. Knife fingers, and he still wouldn't do the wet sponge. He toughed it out because he knew a sponge would be gross to look at. And Trump hasn't just been egging on the ballot drop box crazies in his base. He's also been talking directly to the candidates themselves, encouraging them to double down on his stolen election lies. Take Arizona Senate candidate Blake Masters. When Masters was running for the GOP nomination, he said in an ad that he thought Trump won, and even had a section on his website claiming the election was stolen. But then when it came time to appeal to voters in a general election, he deleted that passage from his website and admitted in a televised debate that he didn't see any actual evidence of vote tampering, which infuriated Trump. In fact, a film crew following Masters for a Tucker Carlson documentary captured a phone call from Trump in which Trump told Masters to stand firm on the claim that the 2020 election was stolen.
Mr. President, how are you, sir? Doing great.
I got a lot of complaints about that. I don't know what you did with the debate, but I heard you did great on the debate, but a bad election answer. You got a lot of support. You got to stay with those people.
Absolutely, we stay with those people.
If you want to get across the line, you got to go stronger in that one thing, because that was the one thing you had a lot of complaints about. Look at Carrie. Carrie's winning with very little money, and if they say, how is your family? She says the election was rigged and stolen. You'll lose if you go soft. You're going to lose that base.
I'm not going soft.
I didn't think anything could be more grating than Trump talking, but I underestimated speakerphone Trump. It really accentuates just how much his throat has deteriorated. He sounds like he's been smoking 3 packs of Marlboros every day and eating one. And sure enough, the entire GOP and their media apparatus are in lockstep behind Trump. In fact, they're now even claiming preemptively that any Democratic wins in the midterms next week must be illegitimate. Like, say, if John Fetterman wins the Senate race in Pennsylvania, even though polls have consistently shown him leading Dr. Oz.
It's not about the person, it's about the party. It's not about the individual, it's about the group. And to prove it, they can even run mentally defective candidates who can barely speak and not only expect them to win, but expect you to accept the outcome no matter how transparently absurd it is. On November 9th, they'll be telling you that John Fetterman got 81 million votes in Pennsylvania, and they'll threaten to put you in jail if you don't believe it. Why wouldn't they do that? They work with Joe Biden.
Why wouldn't they do that? Why wouldn't they conspire to steal an election in Pennsylvania and throw you in jail if you don't believe it? Why wouldn't they come to your house and ask who you voted for? And if you say Republican, why wouldn't they take your house away? Why wouldn't they take your car and all your money? Why wouldn't they take your dog? Why wouldn't they take your second secret dog that's an exact replica of your first dog that you keep in your basement because you've been anticipating that the leftist woke regime would come to your house and take your first dog? Why wouldn't they threaten to put you in jail or kick you off social media or ban you from your favorite restaurant, Carrabba's Italian Grill? And when you show up to Carrabba's in a fake mustache, why wouldn't they point and laugh and say, did you really think that would work? And then, why wouldn't they drag you into the parking lot and make you sit next to small bushes who you only later realized were actually camouflaged lawn chairs? This is all obviously insane, and to combat it, the Democratic Party has turned to perhaps its most popular figure for the last days of the campaign, Barack Obama, who's been out hitting the campaign trail to push back on Republican conspiracy theories, like at recent rallies for Wisconsin Senate candidate Mandela Barnes and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Mandela's opponent has done more than just about anybody in Congress to spread conspiracy theories about the 2020 election. I mean, he has a gold medal in that event. If that doesn't elicit uniform outrage, what will? What does it take? The other day, a video came out of Governor Whitmer's opponent claiming that Democrats have been working for decades to topple the United States because they're still upset about losing the Civil War. And that COVID restrictions were part of some master plan to do this. Now, first of all, what? What? What?
Whatever else you may think of him, you can't help but love stand-up comedy Obama. I mean, clearly working on material for his new Netflix special, Barack the House. It's just nice to see a politician have a normal human reaction to how utterly deranged this all is. I wish we could use that as a reaction clip for everything going forward.
On November 9th, they'll be telling you that John Fetterman got 81 million votes in Pennsylvania, and they'll threaten to put you in jail if you don't believe it.
What?
The stakes of this midterm election couldn't be higher. Republicans have made that clear. They've told us what they plan to do if they win back power, both in Congress and in key states across the country. And priority number one seems to be rigging future elections and laying the groundwork for the next coup attempt. They're already preemptively claiming these elections will be illegitimate if they lose. Most people react to those voter fraud claims the same way I reacted when I first saw Wally's tiny wet sponge, by saying,
what?
This has been A Closer Look. The midterm elections are coming up, so to make sure that you're good to vote in this election, visit our good friends at headcount.org to check your voter registration status or to register to vote.